The alien girl was supposed to break him, so why is she the one blushing? He stands just inside the threshold of the interrogation chamber, eyes locked on the figure seated at the center of the cold, metallic room. The overhead lights flicker, humming with a faint buzz that seems to punctuate the silence. Her posture is poised and unnaturally elegant, as though her spine is flexible in ways his is not, her smooth, silvery skin reflecting the glow of the fluorescent panels in the ceiling. A faint luminescence pulses beneath that skin, perhaps a heartbeat, perhaps something else entirely. He notices she's not trembling. In fact, if anyone is leaking tension, it's him. He can feel his pulse spike for a beat, but he wills it to slow, reminding himself of what he's here to do. She tilts her head as if tasting his hesitation. The ridges along her scalp flex ever so slightly, a quiet crackle of movement beneath that teal sheen. Her lips, full yet oddly translucent at the corners, curve into the faintest hint of a smile. There's no attempt to disguise her silent appraisal of him. Something about that poised, predatory quiet warns him she's sizing him up, strategizing. She should be the prisoner here, but the air is charged with a sense that she's the one in control. He steps forward, boots clicking on the floor. She doesn't move. Is this the part where you beg? Her voice is a low purr, and each word vibrates with a subtle resonance. Or is it where you bleed? He lets that taunt hang in the air. Slowly, almost casually, he sets the dossier on the metal table between them. He doesn't sit. Doesn't even shift his stance. Neither, he says. But you'll scream first. She leans forward, the glow at her collarbone intensifying. His gaze flicks there, then back to her face. She's dangerously beautiful, each feature carved with an almost unearthly symmetry. He's interrogated dozens, no, hundreds, of her kind, but none quite like this. Some part of his mind warns that she was custom-bred for infiltration. But the rest of him can't look away. So certain, she murmurs, leaning back. The restraints around her wrists are more ornamental than practical. He suspects she could slip free if she really wanted. You must be Kale. Yes, the human who breaks people with just a look. My superiors warned me you'd be difficult. He braces his hands on the table, never taking his eyes off her. I'm not your concern. You're mine. She laughs softly, the sound not quite mocking. I was ordered to break you. You do realize that, don't you? He doesn't respond. Instead, he reaches for the chain that binds her wrists to a ring in the center of the table. She stays perfectly still as he tugs it. Her posture shifts only enough to let him see she's neither scared nor defeated. Her gaze roams over the lines of his face, that cold stare he's famous for, and maybe she sees something else. Something about the way her luminescence flickers suggests she caught a flicker of intensity in him. He almost asks how she's controlling her own fear. Then he reminds himself, she's not supposed to have fear. Or at least, not in the usual sense. The alien intel says they're trained from birth in emotional discipline, taught to weaponize desire or intimidation as needed. He's used to reading that emotional discipline as a blank slate. Yet she's giving him nuance. It's a game, and he suspects the only winning move is not to blink first. A sudden vibration rattles the walls, and dust falls from the vents overhead. He glances back, hearing faint alarms in the corridor. There wasn't supposed to be any alert, no one was to disturb this interrogation. Another quake, then the lights flicker again. Her eyes narrow. The ship's under attack, she says, her tone faintly amused. Would you like to continue or do we postpone? He yanks on her chain. Shut up. We're not done. The door hisses open before he can add anything else. A fellow officer stands there, face flushed. We've taken heavy fire. They're hitting our starboard hull. Internal systems are failing. Kale's mind races. He stands there, a moment suspended in uncertainty. They can't simply leave her here. She's too dangerous to release, and too valuable for the brass to lose. He looks down at her, meets that almost playful gleam in her eyes. Get on your feet. She slowly stands, letting him guide her by the chain. Easy now, warrior. She purrs. You don't want me at your back, do you? He's not sure how to respond to that, so he doesn't. He drags her out of the interrogation chamber just as another explosion rocks the corridor. Sparks cascade from shattered screens, and the overhead lights flicker madly. Smoke and chaos greet them, sirens wailing in the distance. The walls creak with the strain of the hull being pummeled from outside. He moves quickly, scanning for an escape route. The officer who interrupted them has vanished, presumably to help or to survive. The chain rattles in his grip as she keeps pace beside him. Half of him wants to bind her legs, her arms, everything, to keep her from turning on him. The other half recognizes that if something tries to kill them in these corridors, he might actually need her assistance. He's heard stories about her skill. Her infiltration record alone is terrifying. An explosion sends a shockwave through the floor, nearly knocking them both off balance. He catches himself, then hears the chain snap. She stares at the broken metal, wrists suddenly free. He tenses, expecting her to attack. But she doesn't move. Instead, she arches an eyebrow. "Well," she says, "seems you have to trust me now." He hates the truth in her statement, but every bone in his body screams that he can't waste time recuffing her. A second explosion blasts down the hall. Fire licks at the edges of the corridor. Sparks rain from the ceiling. He gestures toward an emergency corridor that leads to the docking bay. She's right behind him, moving with inhuman grace. He notices how lithe her form is, how her skin seems to shift with the flickering light, the subtle patterns shifting. He forces himself to focus. "Get down!" he barks, pulling her behind a collapsed beam as a jet of flame shoots past them. She doesn't protest the roughness. A moment later, they're running again, pushing deeper into the ship's labyrinth of corridors. The hull groans, and the deck trembles underfoot. They're being boarded or bombarded, he can't tell which. Possibly both. They reach a sealed blast door. A panel beside it flickers with a small screen. He curses under his breath. Keycard access is offline. He smashes the control with the butt of his sidearm, wires sparking. The door whines but remains stuck. She steps forward without hesitation, slender fingers dancing over the exposed circuitry. He's about to snap at her, but she yanks two wires and fuses them. Sparks fly. The door groans open a meter. Barely enough space to slip through, but it's something. He goes first, sliding through the gap. Immediately, he sees three alien drones prowling the corridor, mechanized sentries with glimmering steel limbs, scanning for targets. He brings up his sidearm, but they pivot fast, lasers warming up. Before he can pull the trigger, she snakes around him, a blur of motion. She leaps, twisting her body, and strikes one drone's sensor head with a vicious kick. Sparks shower. He fires at the second drone, bullet pinging off metal plating, then manages a second shot that pierces its central power unit. The third drone fires a blast that scorches the wall behind them. Kale ducks, muscles burning, and she drives her elbow into the drone's neck joint. It collapses in a heap, twitching. Smoke billows from the debris. She lands with feline grace, turning to him with that sly smirk. "I thought humans were violent," she murmurs. "But you took too long." He bites back a retort. "I didn't realize you'd volunteer to help." She dusts off her wrist, though there's no visible dust to brush away. "We can address your gratitude later. Right now, you need a pilot if you intend to escape. And I can fly any stolen craft better than you." He snorts, though he recognizes that might be true. The docking bay is only a few corridors away, but the path is blocked by collapsed bulkheads. They're forced to crawl through maintenance shafts, the air hot and thick with smoke. He leads, glancing back every so often to confirm she's not slinking off into the dark. But each time, she's right there, following, unflinching. Her glow illuminates the cramped interior, a pale turquoise light that makes his own skin look ghostly by comparison. A loud crash above them. Something tears through the top of the shaft, metal shrieking. They drop into the darkness below, clinging to the rungs of a ladder. Heavy footsteps stomp overhead, enemy soldiers, or maybe mechanical enforcers. He grips his sidearm, wishing he had a rifle. Beside him, she's utterly still, her breath controlled, eyes narrowed. Her lips part an inch, and she mouths, "This way." He nods, silent, leading them deeper into the station's belly. The only advantage is that the main corridors are compromised, so the likely place for a small craft to remain intact is at the secondary docking port. Finally, they reach a hatch marked with old stenciled letters. He forces it open. The moment the panel slides aside, a wave of black smoke hits them. The corridor beyond is nearly unrecognizable. Ceiling panels have collapsed, and flames lick up the walls. He coughs, covering his mouth with the crook of his elbow. She squints through the haze, her ridged head crest flaring slightly. "Don't move," she commands, hooking a finger in the collar of his jacket. He's about to protest, but she leans forward and flicks a small switch on his harness. A built-in filter mask slides into place over his mouth and nose. He forgot he even had it. She meets his eyes, her own expression complicated. Then she steps past him, forging into the chaos. He has little choice but to follow. Another explosion jars them as they press on. They turn a corner, and the docking bay door is in sight, partially open. A single small craft sits on the pad, battered but possibly functional. Before he can shout with relief, movement catches his eye. A squad of heavily armed enemy troopers emerges from behind supply crates, opening fire. Bolts of blue plasma sizzle the air. He throws himself behind a structural beam, returning fire. She slides across the deck, her body contorting in ways that let her evade most of the shots. One trooper tries to flank her, but she leaps and snaps his neck with a fluid twist. Another aims at her back, but Cale plants a bullet in his shoulder, forcing him down. It's a brutal, near-silent dance of carnage, interrupted only by the whine of plasma and the bark of Cale's gun. When the last trooper falls, he staggers against the beam, breathing hard. She stands in the middle of the carnage, her glow pulsating. Splashes of black and red, alien and human blood, mar the deck. She steps over a body and glances at Cale, her expression almost playful. "We're going to talk about that little rescue you just performed," she says, voice breathy. "But later." He doesn't respond. An alert klaxon howls, and the docking bay door starts to close. They sprint for the craft, ducking stray sparks, ignoring the swirling haze. Cale hammers the panel to open the hatch. The craft's interior lights blink to life, revealing cramped seating for two. She vaults into the pilot's seat without ceremony, flipping switches. The engines roar to partial power, sputtering from the damage. The docking bay door is nearly sealed. She curses under her breath, jamming a lever forward. The craft lurches upward, scraping the ceiling. Cale braces himself. With a final surge of thrusters, the ship shoots out of the docking bay, narrowly slipping through a gap in the closing portal. An alarm beeps frantically on the console, indicating multiple hull breaches and failing systems across the larger warship. They pull away just as the vessel lists to one side, half its structure bathed in fire. The starfield beyond is dotted with hostile ships, some with the same insignia she bears, others unidentifiable. It's a war zone, a chaotic swirl of laser fire and flickering explosions. He watches her pilot them through the carnage, weaving past a hail of debris. The tension in her posture is tangible. Her alien physiology might grant her an edge, but she's far from invincible. She spares him a fleeting glance. There's still that flicker of amusement in her eyes, overshadowed by what might be grudging respect. "You wanted me captured," she says, voice raspier now. "Yet here you are, letting me fly you out. You wanted me broken," he retorts. "But look who's helping me survive." She opens her mouth to answer, but a sudden beam lances past them. The craft shudders. Systems squeal in protest. She mutters a curse in her own language and pulls hard on the controls. The thrusters choke, but the ship responds, veering off into open space. The starry void envelopes them, and for a moment, they drift among the wreckage and crossfire. An automated computer voice pipes up, though half garbled. "Navigation offline. Manual override recommended." She's on it, rerouting power. He notices the sweat beading along her temple. Or is that some form of alien secretion? Either way, she's pushing herself, and the tension is thick. But there's an undercurrent, a pounding swirl of adrenaline he hasn't felt in years. They're alive, battered but alive. He grips the co-pilot's seat for balance, scanning the console. We need a heading. This sector's crawling with hostiles. Her fingers blur over the controls. See that planet? She nods at a shimmering green world in the distance. Sparsely charted, rumored to be mostly hostile environment, but it's better than floating here. He frowns. We'll crash. Her lips twitch. You have a better idea? He closes his mouth and stares at her. Then, stiffly, he says, No. She pushes the throttle to maximum. The craft shakes, an old rattle that suggests it's not designed for this level of stress. Outside, the firefight intensifies. Blasts of light streak across the blackness. They manage to skirt the worst of it, diving into the planet's atmosphere. Within seconds, everything is a swirl of green clouds and atmospheric turbulence. He braces his arms against the console, muscles tense. She fights the controls, sweat glistening on her. Warnings flash red across every display. They plummet, wind shears shrieking outside. The ground is approaching far too fast. He hears her inhaling sharply, sees the glow at her collarbone pulsing in time with her heartbeat. She mutters something in her language, prayer or profanity, he can't tell, and yanks on the controls. The thrusters roar. The nose lifts, but not by much. Impact is inevitable, just hopefully not lethal. When they slam into the ground, the jolt nearly dislocates his shoulder. The hull groans, buckles and spots. They skid across the rugged terrain in a shower of earth and rock. Finally, the craft slides to a halt amid thick, greenish smoke. For a moment, neither of them moves. He exhales, checking for broken bones. She coughs, blinking away the haze. Still alive? He glances over, sees a small cut on her cheek oozing pale fluid. Yeah. They pry the hatch open and tumble out. The air is heavy with the scent of sulfur and wet foliage. All around them, towering green plants sway in a thick, humid breeze. The sky above is a swirling emerald gloom. Strange calls echo in the distance, alien cries that stir the hair on the back of his neck. He steadies himself, gun still in hand. She emerges beside him, testing her limbs. Where are we? He asks, even though he knows she won't have a perfect answer. She glances around, scanning the horizon. If the NAV readout was correct, a place your charts call Theta 7. Not exactly a tourist spot. Uncharted predators, toxic swamps, maybe worse. We should move. He nods, wiping sweat and grime from his brow. The ship behind them is a wreck. A quick glance tells him it's not going anywhere without significant repairs. They need shelter, water, a plan. They need to avoid detection. Whoever was pounding that warship might still be searching for survivors. And that includes them. They step away from the craft. His boots sink slightly into spongy soil. She's right beside him, a silent presence. For a moment, they just listen. The drip of moisture from broad leaves. The distant rumble of thunder. It's surreal, this calm after the violence in orbit. We need to find higher ground, he says at last, scanning the vine-laced trees. We can see if anything's around us. She inclines her head, that luminous band at her collar flickering. Lead on, human! He almost snarls at the disrespectful tone, but swallows it. This is a forced partnership. She's not an ally by choice. They proceed, moving cautiously through the dense, alien foliage. Everything here looks like it could kill them. The plants themselves shift in the breeze, leaves shaped like spears or drooping tendrils that might be venomous. She touches his arm, alerting him to a strangling vine creeping along the ground. He steps around it, offering a curt nod. The sound of the ship exploding behind them rips through the thick air. They spin around. Flames burst from the twisted hull as the fuel cells finally detonate, sending debris skyward in a ferocious spire of heat. Their only ride off this planet is gone. He catches her eye. For a heartbeat, she looks genuinely rattled, lips parted in something close to fear. Then she masks it, standing straighter. He clenches his jaw. No help is coming. They're on hostile terrain, reliant on each other for survival. She was supposed to be his prisoner. He was supposed to be her victim. The lines have blurred in a matter of hours. With no other option, they plunge deeper into the alien jungle, side by side. Underscore 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 underscore. They force their way through thick, swampy undergrowth, the ground sucking at their boots. Strange, chittering insects swarm overhead, occasionally diving to taste their sweat. Kale curses, waving them away. Sarika walks a step ahead, scanning for threats in her silent, fluid way. It irks him that she's taken point, but she navigates these obstacles with a grace he can't match. He has to wonder, is she leading him into a trap? But then, what reason would she have to ambush him here? There's no sign of her allies, no rescue ships overhead. They're both isolated. Besides, she's let multiple opportunities to kill him pass by. He pushes aside a broad leaf larger than his torso. A droplet of sap splashes onto his glove, sizzling faintly. Acidic? He shakes it off, frowning. This entire place feels like a deliberate test of their will to survive. He's not about to fail. A personal vendetta burns in him. The war, his lost brother, he can't give in. Not to the environment, and certainly not to her manipulations. She can be alluring as she pleases. He's endured worse than seduction. She halts suddenly, raising a hand. He stops, listening. A rustle in the brush to their left. Something large. He slowly reaches for his sidearm. Sarika's eyes narrow, that glow intensifying. He sees her gather her weight on the balls of her feet, ready for a fight. A shape lumbers into view, thick-skinned and multi-limbed, resembling some monstrous cross between an insect and a gorilla. Its chitinous armor glimmers in the dappled light. It snorts, releasing a foul stench. Kale's finger tightens on the trigger. She gives him a micro shake of her head, as if telling him to wait. The beast sniffs the air, stares at them with bulbous black eyes. A tense moment passes. Then it lets out a low hiss and ambles away, crashing through the undergrowth with surprising speed. They exhale simultaneously, and he notices her shoulders drop, as if she'd been bracing for a worse outcome. "You were about to shoot," she says under her breath. "That would have drawn more predators. It might have killed us anyway," he retorts. She smirks. "I could have taken it." He almost rolls his eyes. "Sure." They continue until the jungle thins, giving way to a ridge of black rock. Clambering up the slope, they reach a plateau overlooking a river of dark, sluggish water. The skies overhead swirl with deep green clouds, faint flashes of lightning flickering within. The humidity is oppressive. His clothes stick to his skin, and every muscle aches from the crash and the constant tension. She points to a rocky overhang not far from the riverbank. "That could be shelter." He scans the area, eyes narrowing. "We'll risk it. But we need to purify water if we're going to last." She nods once. Together, they make their way down the ridge. The overhang is a natural cave-like formation, though small. It's barely tall enough for him to stand upright. She crouches gracefully, eyes darting inside. No signs of immediate threats. He checks for hidden dangers while she systematically sets a small device from her belt near the entrance, likely scanning for motion or detecting toxins. They settle inside, breaths ragged. The day feels endless, yet it's only been hours since they fled the warship. He pulls out a small ration pack from his belt, tears it open. She watches him with parted lips, clearly calculating whether to beg or demand a share. He tosses her half. She catches it without a word, then tears into it. The moment she tastes it, her expression sours, and the glow on her collar dims. "Human food," she mutters, swallowing with visible distaste. "Better than starving," he says simply. She doesn't argue. They eat in silence, occasionally glancing at each other through the gloom. The tension that first flared in the interrogation chamber hasn't dissipated. If anything, it's grown more complicated. She was supposed to torment him for information, and he was supposed to break her down to an emotional wreck. Instead, they're surviving together, forced into a fragile alliance. He finishes his ration and starts checking his gear. Most of it's battered. He discards a few useless components. Then he moves to examine her. "Let me see your arm." She narrows her eyes. "It's fine. You were hit back there." He gestures at a dark stain near her bicep. She's trying to hide it, but the fluid seeping through the fabric is a tell. "Don't be stupid." She exhales. "Don't order me around." But she extends her arm anyway. He gently peels away the fabric to reveal a gash. Pale fluid seeps out, and the edges of the wound pulse with that faint luminescence. It's mesmerizing. He's never tended to one of her kind's wounds before. Carefully, he applies a disinfectant from his kit, noting how her ridged scalp flexes at the sting. "You like that?" she murmurs, voice low as she watches him. He applies a bandage, ignoring her insinuation. "It's a medical procedure, not a date." She smiles, a slow curve of lips that displays something akin to amusement. "What exactly is a date to humans?" He ignores that. He can't quite ignore the way his heart pounds when he touches her. He tells himself it's just the adrenaline. The intense environment. The forced proximity. He finishes dressing her wound and moves away. She rolls her shoulder experimentally, no thanks given. He doesn't expect any. A rumble of thunder vibrates the cave ceiling. Rain begins to patter outside, thick droplets splashing into the river. They watch from the threshold, silent. She stands close, close enough that he feels the warmth radiating from her, a heat that's more than just the humid air. Her collar glows in slow pulses. He wonders if that's her heartbeat, or an emotional tell, or something else entirely. "We should rest," he mutters, aware that they both need sleep if they're to face tomorrow's unknown challenges. She arches an eyebrow. "You trust me enough to sleep in my presence?" He frowns. "I'll manage." They end up taking shifts, though not formally agreed upon. He settles against the cave wall, letting the exhaustion wash over him, while she perches near the entrance, luminous eyes trained on the jungle. Occasionally, she glances his way, as if verifying he hasn't died yet. He closes his eyes, dozing lightly. A scream in the distance jerks him awake. He sits bolt upright, hand on his weapon. She's already there, crouched near the entrance. She gestures for silence. Another scream, more distant this time. Possibly an animal, or an alien intruder. Hard to say. Tension sizzles in the air like an electric current. "All clear," she whispers, not entirely convinced herself. He nods, settling back down, though his heart pounds for a while before sleep reclaims him. Underscore 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 underscore. He wakes with a start. The world is dimmer now, the green glow outside replaced by something closer to twilight. She's no longer at the entrance. Instead, she's pacing near the back of the cave. He notices her posture is tight, as if something's agitating her. The moment she senses he's awake, she stops, arms folding across her chest. "I scouted briefly," she says. "There's a communications outpost about a kilometer west. Old, might be abandoned. Possibly from a time when this planet was used for secret negotiations." Her eyes flick toward him. "We need to see if it's still operational." He stands stretching. Muscles ache, but he forces himself not to show weakness. "Lead the way," he grunts. They set out, cautious but swift. The rain has eased, leaving behind us slick, mossy terrain that squelches underfoot. The air is thick, a mixture of humidity and the pungent aroma of decaying vegetation. He wonders how she's coping with all these unfamiliar pathogens. Her physiology might not be immune to them. Then again, his might not be either. They eventually spot a weathered structure rising from a cluster of twisted trees, half buried in vines. Panels of worn metal and shattered glass suggest it was once some kind of facility. They approach carefully. The entrance is half blocked by debris, so he shoulders through, stepping into a dim corridor littered with collapsed beams and broken consoles. Inside, it feels like a time capsule from a forgotten era. Lights flicker sporadically, powered by a generator that must be on its last legs. She runs her fingers over a battered control panel. The system crackles to life, revealing a bilingual interface, human standard on one side, alien script on the other. That sets him on edge. She lifts an eyebrow. A joint operation? I thought your people hated mine. He shakes his head. There must have been some alliance attempt. Before everything went to hell. He tries a few commands. The interface buzzes angrily. She leans in, pressing a sequence of alien symbols. A faint hum resonates. Then the main console's screen flickers, revealing a half-broken map of the local sector. More important, it displays a communications array status, offline. She curses softly. We need power, she says, voice taut. He notices a side corridor leading to what might be a generator room. They move in that direction, wading through dust and fallen cables. The place is deserted, no signs of immediate threats. But the tension is heavy, as if ghosts of old negotiations cling to the walls. Their footfalls echo. When they reach the generator, it's in disrepair. Exposed wires, leaking coolant, half the casing smashed. Still, she tries to reroute energy. He watches her expression shift from frustration to focus, that ridged scalp flexing as she works. He can't help noticing how her glowing collar intensifies whenever she's determined. They argue about the best approach, whether to jerry-rig an auxiliary circuit or risk a jumpstart. Their argument is sharp, each sentence bristling with unspoken challenge. She stands too close, he steps back, then she steps closer. It's an argument that feels strangely intimate, as though every exchange of words is a test of boundaries. Eventually, she hisses, "Just shut up and let me do this." And he does, bristling but conceding. Her fingers move quickly over the wiring. A spark, a hiss of steam. The generator chugs once, twice, then roars to half-life. Overhead, some lights flare brighter, powering the console outside. She steps back, triumphant. "Don't look so pleased," he mutters. "We still don't know if it's enough to send a distress signal." She tosses him a glare but heads back to the main console. He follows, ignoring the electric tension between them. Once there, she flips a few toggles and tries to initialize the communications array. The system sputters. The screen displays partial coordinates. The transmitter whines, but there's no stable connection. He exhales. "If it's damaged physically, we won't get a signal out." She grips the edges of the console. "I could climb to the roof, check the dish." He eyes the ceiling. "It might collapse." "I'll go." She snorts. "I'm lighter. And better at climbing." He steps in front of her. "No. I don't trust you alone." Her luminous band flickers brighter. She steps closer until they're almost chest to chest, voice low. "Worried I'll betray you, or worried I'll disappear?" He sets his jaw. "I don't have time for your games." With a derisive huff, she sidesteps him and marches toward a broken stairwell. He curses under his breath and follows, practically on her heels. The building groans ominously as they ascend. Vines drape through cracks in the walls, letting in trickles of greenish daylight. They reach what used to be the roof access, now a hole in the structure with a precarious ledge. The communications dish stands at a slant, tangled in creepers. She edges out first, balancing with eerie grace on the crumbling ledge. He can't help feeling a surge of alarm. If she falls, that's his valuable prisoner. No, that's a potential ally, lost. He clamps his mouth shut, forcing himself not to bark at her. She kneels by the dish's base, examining severed cables and twisted metal. The wind tugs at them, swirling with the threat of an impending storm. A snap from below. The ledge shifts. He lunges forward, grabbing her arm as the chunk of concrete beneath her crumbles. She gasps, actually gasps, as she slips, For a moment, they're both at the brink. Her eyes go wide, that glow pulsing in frantic beats. He strains to pull her back. The ledge cracks again. He throws his weight backward. They tumble onto a more stable section of rooftop, her half on top of him. She exhales shakily, catching herself with a hand on his chest. Their faces are inches apart. His pulse thunders. She stares at him, the ridges along her scalp trembling with adrenaline. He feels the heat of her breath, sees the faint flush that spreads across her cheeks. Then she quickly pushes off him, rising to her feet with an air of forced composure. "You," she mutters, glancing away. "You saved me again. Don't get used to it." He stands, brushing dust off. She turns back to the dish, her voice subdued but determined. "Help me secure the base. We can't fix it from here, but we might be able to set it upright enough for a partial signal." He nods, ignoring the swirl of conflicting emotions. Together, they anchor the dish with a combination of cables and vines, propping it against a stable beam. The entire time, they jostle each other in tight spaces, exchanging clipped instructions. Every brush of an arm or shoulder sends a bolt of awareness through him. He knows she feels it, too, because her luminescent collar flares whenever they make contact. When they finally secure the dish, the storm breaks in earnest, pelting them with hot, stinging rain. They race back inside, drenched, adrenaline pumping. The console flickers. She tries reinitializing the transmitter again, face set in concentration. Static crackles over the speakers. "A partial signal?" she curses. "The dish is still out of alignment. This place is worthless." He slumps against the wall, wiping rainwater from his eyes. "Then it's a dead end." She doesn't move from the console. For a moment, he sees her trembling, shoulders taut. Another wave of tension. She's been planning something, or maybe hoping. She's an alien assassin or operative meant to break him. But now she's stuck in a dead facility with him. Finally, she stands, anger and frustration etched across her features. "Fine," she says. "We move on. But I won't just wander the jungle with you aimless. If we don't find a ship or a working beacon soon, your people's war, or my people's war, will catch us in the crossfire." He runs a hand through his damp hair. "We'll head for higher ground in the morning. Maybe we'll see something, lights, movement, technology that's salvageable." She presses her lips together. "We'd better," she whispers, voice resonating with the hints of a challenge. They spend the rest of the evening in what was once an office or a briefing room, clearing debris to create a makeshift camp. The tension in their interactions never fades. Even mundane tasks, like clearing away broken furniture, become an exercise in dominance and control. He scowls when she orders him around, she sneers when he tries to command her. They dance around each other, pushing and pulling, always on the brink of clashing. But they never quite cross that line. Perhaps because, deep down, they know they need each other alive. Night falls in a wash of eerie twilight. Rain still patters on the roof. They exchange watch shifts again, though either sleeps well. Outside, thunder growls, and the wind howls. Lightning flashes, illuminating the building in harsh bursts. In those moments, he catches glimpses of her face, reflecting the quicksilver glow of her collar. Her expression is unreadable, but he can sense the conflict in her, a maelstrom of thoughts and emotions she refuses to share. He's equally conflicted. She was supposed to be his prisoner, an enemy. Yet she's saved him more than once, and he's saved her in turn. They banter like adversaries, but there's something beneath it, something that makes his blood surge in a way he hasn't felt in years. He forces himself to remain cold. This is war, and she's not human. Even if she's breathtaking in a lethal sort of way, even if her voice resonates in his bones like a siren's call, he cannot let himself become vulnerable. Daylight, or the planet's version of it, comes too soon. With it they gather their supplies still half ruined, and depart the outpost, leaving the flickering screens behind. They walk in tense silence toward the ridge they spotted the day before, determined to find a vantage point high enough to see across the landscape. The hunt for a workable signal, or a craft, continues. Yet both suspect that the real danger isn't the jungle or the local predators. It's the unstoppable magnetism pulling them toward each other, a lure that could burn them both. Underscore 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 underscore. A shimmering heat haze envelopes the plateau by the time they reach it. The climb is grueling, but neither complains. They scramble over jagged rocks, a mutual ferocity driving them upward. The sun, or the star, anyway, burns overhead, pressing sweat from every pore. He can't see her sweat in the same way. Perhaps her alien skin simply handles heat differently. But her breathing is ragged, and that luminescent band at her collar pulses in a quick, irregular rhythm. Once at the top, the view is astonishing. Miles of dense jungle stretch in all directions, broken by a few scattered cliffs and winding rivers. In the distance, a wide waterfall cascades over black stone. A swirl of clouds circles a mountain peak far off, but there's no obvious sign of civilization or rescue. Just the raw, primal wilderness. She scans the horizon, shielding her eyes. If we head northwest, the terrain seems less dense. We might cover ground faster. He nods. And if we can find a better vantage point beyond that ridge, we might catch a glimpse of settlement lights or an atmospheric disturbance from ships. They share a look that borders on understanding. Then they begin the descent. It's steeper on this side, forcing them to move slowly. Twice she almost slips, and he finds himself instinctively reaching to steady her. She shakes him off, but he can see the flicker of gratitude in her expression. They proceed in silence, neither acknowledging the subtle sense of partnership forming. The air grows heavier as they enter the thicker portion of the jungle below. The path they choose skirts a series of rocky outcroppings, forming a natural wall on their left. Moisture drips from giant leaves overhead, pattering onto the rocky ground. With the increased humidity, the smell of decaying vegetation becomes more pungent. After an hour of trudging, they reach a clearing. A swirl of footprints in the mud catches their attention, bipedal, definitely not the massive beast they saw earlier. He kneels, studying them, his brow furrowed. These look recent. And I see different sizes. She crouches beside him, her ridged scalp shifting. Could be a local tribe. He glances at her, lips thinning. Could be your kind. She gives a mirthless smile. Or yours. They decide to follow the tracks cautiously, weapons at the ready. The trail leads deeper into a low-lying stretch of marshland, where the mud threatens to suck them down with every step. The footprints grow fresher, more frequent. Eventually, they come upon an encampment. Tents of woven plant fibers, simple huts. Figures move among them, humanoid but not obviously alien like her. They appear to be some offshoot colony or perhaps an old research group. However, something is off. The entire place feels tense, the inhabitants watching them with wary eyes. They step forward carefully. A handful of men and women approach, arms raised. They speak in a language he only partially recognizes, some variant of Standard with a heavy accent. Through gestures and a few decipherable words, the locals lead them into a central area. There, an older man with a scarred face and a rough staff greets them. He looks Kale up and down, then eyes Sarika with a mixture of curiosity and distrust. Kale attempts a greeting. We crashed here. Need help. A signal off-world. The man only partially understands, or pretends not to. Sarika tries a different dialect. The man's expression grows guarded. He mutters something, pointing at her then at Kale. It becomes clear that these people have encountered both humans and her species in the past, and none of those encounters ended well. They're brought to a larger hut near the center of the settlement. The man indicates for them to stay, possibly offering them a place to rest. Sarika surveys the interior, a dirt floor, woven walls, a thatched roof. There's a small fire pit in the middle. Kale remains by the entrance, scanning for potential threats. The tension among the locals is tangible. No one trusts them, and they don't trust the locals either. A woman brings them bowls of steaming stew. Kale sniffs it, uncertain. The aroma is earthy, tinged with something bitter. Sarika tries a small spoonful, her glowing band flickering as she tastes. She nods. Edible, she says curtly. He takes a sip, wincing at the strong flavor. But hunger outweighs caution, and they eat in silence while the locals watch from a respectful distance. The older man occasionally peers in, checking that they haven't caused trouble. It's an uneasy peace, but for now, they have shelter and something resembling food. As night falls again, the settlement quiets except for distant chanting or singing. A faint melody drifts through the humid air, accompanied by rhythmic drumming. The huts cast dancing shadows across the clearing. Firelight flickers on the walls of their shared hut. They sit opposite each other, the flicker making the lines of their faces appear sharper. She lowers her empty bowl and studies him. You're unusually calm for someone forced into an alien village with me. He sets his own bowl aside. Calm is how I survive. I don't let emotion rule me. She tilts her head. That's a lie. I see the fury in your eyes sometimes, and the regret. I taste your conflict. He stiffens. You taste it? She shrugs, a slight curve of her lips. My species senses emotional states. We can't read minds, but we sense shifts, especially through pheromones. He leans forward, expression harsh. Stay out of my head. She meets his gaze, unwavering. You're the one letting your chemicals betray you. I'm just aware. He wants to retort, but the warmth in the small hut is stifling. The combined heat from the fire and the day's exertion has him sweating through his shirt. She's equally overheated, removing parts of her tattered suit to let her skin breathe. Each time she moves, the ambient light plays across her smooth, alien contours. He hates that he notices. Hates that a part of him finds it compelling. She closes her eyes for a moment, inhaling. Even now your adrenaline spikes. Why? He doesn't answer, jaw tightening. A flicker of disappointment crosses her features. I see. A local woman peeks into the hut, muttering a few words in that unknown dialect. The gist is an invitation or an instruction to step outside. Reluctantly, Kale and Sarika follow her. The entire village has gathered around a central bonfire. The older man from before stands there, chanting in a low voice. It seems to be some sort of nightly ritual, prayers, perhaps, or a ceremony. The flames leap high, illuminating the circle of onlookers. The man beckons them forward. With caution, they approach the fire, feeling dozens of eyes on them. The chanting grows. Another man pours some thick liquid into the flames, sending sparks and colored smoke spiraling upward. A younger villager steps forward with what looks like a token or a carved emblem. He offers it to Sarika, who hesitates, then takes it gently. The old man nods, pointing to the glowing band at her collar, then to the fire. Is he acknowledging her alien nature, or seeking some omen? Sarika glances at Kale. He shrugs, equally mystified. She steps closer to the flames, holding the token out. The old man raises his staff, chanting louder. The smoke swirls around her, and for an instant, her luminescent collar glows brighter, as if echoing the fiery light. A hush falls over the crowd. Then the chanting slows, the man lowers his staff, and the circle of villagers disperses. It's anticlimactic, yet meaningful to them in some obscure way. Kale notices that the locals remain guarded but less hostile now. They've included Sarika in their ritual, albeit hesitantly. Perhaps they sense she's not here to slaughter them. She returns to his side, expression perplexed. That was unexpected, she murmurs. He nods. What do you think it means? She runs a thumb over the carved token. I don't know. Maybe acceptance, maybe a warning. They return to their hut, uncertain of what the future holds. But it's one more day survived in this strange limbo between war and uneasy peace. underscore 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 underscore. The next morning, the village stirs early, roosters or some avian equivalent crowing in the dawn light. Kale steps outside to find the old man waiting. The man gestures for him to follow, leading him to a shallow pit where a device resembling an archaic generator lies half buried. Kale kneels, brushes away the dirt. It appears to be a hybrid of human and alien tech, possibly a leftover from the outpost's golden era. Could it be salvageable for communications? He calls Sarika over. They spend an hour examining it. The old man, with gestures and single words, explains that it stopped functioning years ago. Kale's hope sparks. If they can repair it, maybe they can power a short-range transmitter or at least something that can boost the distress beacon. Sarika's slender fingers probe the machine's innards, lip curling at the rust and rot. He's about to ask for a status when she stands abruptly, eyes shining. It might work, she says, but we need specific components. We could scavenge from that outpost we found, or maybe from a nearby wreck if one exists. The old man picks up on some of the discussion, nodding vigorously. He points to the west, where the jungle thickens again. Seems there's a chance a crashed vessel or abandoned cargo might lie in that direction. The idea of venturing deeper into unknown territory brimming with dangers is daunting. But they have little choice. If they want off this planet, they need that generator operational. They gather supplies, mostly dried herbs, water in crude canteens, and a few local remedies for stings or bites. The villagers remain wary, but some offer quiet support. Kale senses they'd be just as happy to see them succeed and leave. Or maybe they fear an eventual confrontation with either human or alien forces if word gets out about their hideaway. Sarika thanks the old man with a slight bow. The man nods, tapping his staff once. Then Kale and Sarika step beyond the village perimeter, forging westward. As soon as they leave the huts behind, that raw tension returns, swirling between them in the humid air. Their mutual goal is clear, but neither can ignore the simmering attraction that's grown more potent since that near fall on the rooftop. Hours pass in silence, broken only by the rustle of leaves underfoot and the buzz of insects. The forest canopy overhead is thick, allowing only dappled light. Every so often, they catch sight of small creatures scuttling in the branches, eyes gleaming with curiosity or malice. They're forced to wade through sections of bog, water up to their knees, the mud reeking of sulfur. Eventually, they stumble upon a massive shape half sunken in the swamp. Twisted metal, scorched plating, a craft of some sort. Sarika climbs onto a broken panel, wiping moss away to reveal alien script. Her script. Kale stands below, gun raised in case of threats. A hush falls over the swamp, as if the local wildlife knows to avoid this graveyard of technology. She drops back down, landing in front of him. It's from my people. Possibly a supply transport, crashed long ago. Might have something we can use for the generator. He gives a curt nod. Let's check it. They pry open a ragged seam in the hull, stepping into a dark interior. The air is stale, thick with mold. A few overhead lights flicker but quickly die. They rely on small handheld lights, scanning corridors littered with debris. Bodies, skeletal remains, lie pinned under beams, half submerged in murky water. The stench is overwhelming. Kale sets a hand over his mouth, and even Sarika grimaces. Slowly, they make their way to what might have been the engineering section. Panels are smashed, wires dangle like vines. She rummages through the wreckage, searching for intact components. He keeps watch, though his gaze drifts to her now and then, especially when she extends her body to reach into tight spaces. He wonders if she notices his attention. She exhales in triumph as she lifts a small module, shaped like a rectangular box with glowing edges. A power converter. Might be what we need. He arches an eyebrow. Are you certain? She shoves it at him. As certain as I can be without a proper lab. He tucks it into his pack. Let's see what else we can salvage. They push deeper into the ship, carefully navigating collapsed passages. At one junction, a rusted door blocks their path. She tries the panel, but it's dead. He braces a shoulder against the door. Help me push. She joins him, their combined weight forcing the door open with a screech. On the other side, a small cargo bay appears intact. Rows of crates line the walls, though many have been broken open. He cracks one crate, revealing sealed canisters of some chemical compound. Another crate holds rations in vacuum-sealed packs. He smirks. She notices his grin. Looks like your day just got better, Kale. He grabs a ration pack. Better hope they're not expired. She eyes the label. From the manufacture date, these are old, but sealed. Possibly edible. They decide to load a few into their packs, as any extra supplies might help. Then they notice a low hum, barely audible, emanating from the far corner of the bay. A single console glows faintly, powered by a flicker of residual energy. Sarika approaches, tapping the screen. Lines of alien text fill the display, diagnostics, partial logs. She scans them, brow furrowed. This ship was on a covert mission, carrying experimental weapons. The logs mention a prototype infiltration device. Seems they crashed before delivering it. He tenses, scanning the bay for anything that looks like a weapon. Could it still be on board? She gives a small shrug. Possibly. But it might be worthless now, or it might be lethal. He sighs. We're not here for that. Unless it helps us get off this rock. Reluctantly, they leave the console, mindful that any tampering with an alien weapon could be catastrophic. They have what they came for, the power converter, some supplies. Enough, maybe, to fix the generator in the village. With packs heavier, they retrace their steps, stepping over the grim remains of the crash. The air feels even more oppressive when they finally emerge into the swamp. A sudden splash behind them puts them on alert. They spin, weapons drawn, hearts pounding. Nothing emerges at first. Then, from the gloom, a pair of figures appear, armed with makeshift spears. Not from the village, but definitely local. Their faces are painted in swirling patterns, eyes narrowed. They shout in an unfamiliar language and advance threateningly. Kale tries to signal peace, but they're not receptive. Sarika tenses, shifting into a fighting stance. The first figure lunges, spear point aimed at her midsection. She sidesteps, grabs the spear shaft, and wrenches it free with a twist that cracks the attacker's wrist. The second tries to flank her, but Kale fires a warning shot near his feet. The sharp retort of the gun echoes in the swamp. The attacker freezes, eyes wide. Another shot hits the water next to him, and he spins, fleeing into the dense foliage. His wounded companion scrambles after him, cradling his wrist. Breath hitches in Kale's throat. We'd better move. She nods, returning to his side. The tension from the encounter coils through them, hearts pounding. They navigate back through the murk, anxious that more hostiles might be lurking. Each step, they remain close, scanning every shadow. It feels almost intimate, having each other's backs. Finally, they reach higher ground. The sun hangs low, painting the sky in a sickly orange. Night will fall soon, and traveling through the swamp after dark is suicide. They find a relatively dry clearing near a cluster of towering trees. With minimal discussion, they start setting up a makeshift camp. He gathers branches for a small fire, she arranges the supplies, rummaging for something to eat. When the fire's lit, she warms her hands, eyes reflecting the flicker. The temperature drops at night, and the humid heat transitions to a damp chill. Kale pulls out one of the newly acquired ration packs. She eyes it suspiciously. He tears it open, offering half to her. She takes it wordlessly, biting into the dried contents. They chew in silence. The tension between them is deeper now, an undercurrent that pulses in the dark. He tries not to stare at the curve of her neck or the luminous pulse beneath her collar. She tries not to notice how his breathing changes when she shifts a bit too close. Eventually, she sets her food down. You were quick to protect me today. He stiffens. I just didn't want a spear through your chest. Then I'd be alone. She snorts softly. You'd survive. That's not the point. She lifts a brow. What is? He doesn't have a ready answer. Instead, he focuses on feeding the fire, poking at the embers. She watches him, something like a question in her eyes. But neither speaks further. The night deepens, insects chirp, and the swirl of primal tension grows heavier. When they're finally ready to sleep, they stretch out on the ground, using packs as pillows. The fire crackles between them, casting dancing shadows across their bodies. He closes his eyes, aware of her every breath. She's close enough that he feels the heat of her presence. He tells himself it's just survival instincts that make his pulse jump. But in truth, it feels like a gravitational pull he can't ignore. She stares at him through half-lidded eyes, the glow on her collar now faint, as if dimmed by exhaustion. She can't deny the electricity that crackles whenever they clash or cooperate. She was meant to break him, but she feels herself unraveling in this place, bound by necessity and something deeper. They drift into an uneasy sleep, half expecting the night to bring more danger. Yet the jungle remains relatively calm around them, as if acknowledging a temporary truce. In the darkness, they both dream of collisions, fire and war and breathless embraces they refuse to name. Underscore 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 underscore. Morning dawns with a golden hue, the sky strangely clear. They stir, stiff from sleeping on the ground. Wordlessly they pack up, continuing their trek back to the village. The tension in the air thickens with each step, unspoken desires and frustrations tangling inside them. By midday, they arrive at the village. The old man greets them, eyes flicking to the power converter they carry. They set to work immediately, dragging the salvage to the half-buried generator. A small crowd of villagers gathers, watching from a polite distance. Sarika and Kale argue over the wiring, each claiming to know the best approach. Their voices rise, confrontation sizzling in the humid air. Finally, Sarika grips his arm. Don't be a fool, let me do it, or we risk frying the entire circuit. He stares her down. I've got enough experience with human tech too. This isn't purely human. Unless you've suddenly mastered my people's design, stand aside. Her voice is low, but each word sears with challenge. He clenches his jaw, stepping back, bristling. She kneels beside the generator and methodically installs the converter. For a moment, he just watches the shape of her ridged scalp, the slender lines of her neck. Then he forces himself to focus on scanning for danger. She reattaches the final wire. The generator sputters, coughs, then surges with energy. Lights flicker, a faint hum permeates the area. The crowd murmurs. She steps back, sweaty and triumphant. Kale steps forward, toggling a battered console connected to the device. A feeble readout blinks. The system is unstable but functioning. Good job, he mutters. She nods curtly. It's the closest they've come to a civil exchange in days. The old man points to another device that looks like a crude transmitter. Kale powers it on, fiddling with dials. Static roars through a speaker. Sarika adjusts a frequency knob. For a moment, they catch a ghostly voice, distorted beyond recognition. Then it fades into white noise. Sweat drips down Kale's temple. We need an antenna, he says, scanning the settlement. Something to boost the signal. The old man gestures for a couple of villagers to bring a tall metal rod and some wires. With improvised solutions, they rig a makeshift antenna on a wooden scaffold. It's precarious but might work. The entire time, Sarika's glowing collar pulses with a mixture of frustration and hope. When they power up the transmitter again, the static changes pitch. Kale presses a button. Mayday! Mayday! This is Kale Jareth, ID 7902, requesting evac at planet Theta 7. Priority rescue needed. If anyone hears this, respond. Silence. Then a burst of crackling interference. They try multiple frequencies, but no clear response emerges. After a while, the villagers drift away, leaving the two of them alone with the hiss of static. Sarika stands close, arms folded, gazing at the jury-rigged machine. "It might take time," she says softly. He exhales, tension lining his brow. "Time we might not have." She doesn't disagree. A hush settles. Finally, the old man returns, tapping his staff on the ground. He points at the generator, then at the transmitter, and mimes an explosion. Kale interprets it as, "Keep it powered at your own risk." The rig is unstable, could fail or blow at any moment. He nods, acknowledging the warning. The day stretches on, the transmitter crackling hopelessly. They check the readouts, tweak the alignment, try to coax a better signal. Sarika occasionally brushes against him in the cramped space, each contact a spark of heat. It wears on them both, a silent struggle neither acknowledges. By nightfall, exhaustion weighs heavy. They collapse in their designated hut, the transmitter still running on minimal power. The old man offers them more stew, which they gulp down without complaint. The rest of the village settles into the quiet rhythms of their life. She sets her bowl aside. "We should take turns monitoring the signal. If we get a response, it might be brief." He nods. "I'll go first." She starts to say something, then changes her mind. Instead, she stands, heading to the transmitter, leaving him alone to brood. After a few minutes, he follows, taking his post. For hours, they sit in the dim glow of a guttering lantern, listening to nothing but static. Occasionally, they try a new frequency. Occasionally, the static changes tone, and their hearts leap, only to sink again. At some point in the night, Sarika drifts off, slumped against a wall. He turns his gaze to her, noticing for the first time how vulnerable she looks in sleep. Gone is the mocking, seductive mask. Her ridged scalp, the smooth lines of her features, the parted lips. A faint flush on her cheeks. His pulse flutters. He starts to look away but catches himself, fingers clenching around the transmitter controls. Damn her. Damn this place. Damn the war. He squeezes his eyes shut. No nice vulnerability. He can't afford it. Yet the memory of her body pressed against his, the near fall on the rooftop, the crash, it all collides in his mind. She was meant to be an instrument of his destruction. And he was meant to be the one who shatters her illusions, forces her to reveal her secrets. But they've only found each other's raw edges, a sharp friction that's impossible to ignore. The static drags on. Hours pass. Outside, the sky lightens. He must have dozed off for a moment because he stirs when she shifts. Her eyes flutter open, meeting his. The hush between them feels intimate. She parts her lips to speak, but then a crackle from the transmitter draws their attention. A faint voice emerges, distorted, barely intelligible. Kale jolts forward, adjusting the dial. The voice flickers again. Something about an inbound patrol, coordinates. His heart leaps. They're not alone out here, after all. But before he can clarify, the signal vanishes into static. Sarika curses under her breath, tries to recapture it. No luck. Still, it's a sign that help, or danger, lurks near. A chance that a rescue ship might pass through, or that an enemy patrol is sweeping the system. He and Sarika share a look, adrenaline thrumming anew. The final stretch of this journey is beginning. Underscore 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 underscore. By midday, rumors ripple through the village. The old man's scouts report seeing a small craft descend beyond the far ridge. Could be a rescue team, could be a threat. Kale and Sarika prepare to set out again, each arming themselves. She finds a short spear from the villagers, testing its balance, while he checks his sidearm's remaining ammo. They slip away, forging once more through the dense jungle. The path is uphill, winding around the ridge. Their nerves are frayed, yet the tension between them intensifies. Every brush of foliage or hidden vine feels like a potential ambush. At the top of the ridge, they crouch behind rocks, scanning the valley below. Sure enough, a small, sleek craft rests amid the tall grass, bearing the insignia of Kale's faction. 2 men in uniform stand guard outside, rifles at the ready. He recognizes them immediately, special ops, the kind sent on search and destroy missions. His heart clenches. She senses his tension. "Your people," she whispers. He nods slowly. "They might be here to rescue me, or they might have orders to kill you on sight." Her luminescent band flickers. "Then we need to be careful. Let me guess, you won't let them kill me?" He doesn't answer directly. Instead, he gestures for her to stay low as they descend. They approach from a blind angle, taking cover behind the natural slope. Voices carry on the wind. One of the men is saying they have limited time, that they need to sweep the area for the missing soldier, Kale. The other curses about alien interference. Kale steels himself, steps into view with his hands raised. "Don't shoot. I'm unarmed." The 2 men whip around, rifles aimed. Their eyes widen in recognition. "Kale? Commander Kale Jareth, we thought you were dead." He nods, swallowing. "Ship was destroyed. Crashed on the planet. I need evac." They relax slightly, though they keep their weapons at the ready. "Where's the prisoner?" Sarika steps out behind him, posture tense. The men immediately level their guns at her. Kale stands between them. "She's with me." One soldier sneers. "That's the alien? Then step aside, sir. Our orders are to eliminate high-value targets that can't be safely contained." Kale's eyes burn. "She's not a threat anymore. We need her alive." The men exchange looks. "We've got strict orders," one says, voice grim. "If there's any sign of infiltration, we neutralize." Sarika tenses, her grip on the spear tight. For a moment, the world stands still. Kale's mind floods with images, her fighting by his side, her saving him, the raw connection they've developed. He can't let them take her. He draws his sidearm, pointing it squarely at the nearest soldier. The man's eyes go wide. "Commander, what the—" "I won't let you touch her," Kale growls. "Lower your rifles." They hesitate, shocked. The second soldier scowls. "Are you insane? She's the enemy. She's probably messing with your head." Sarika watches, chest heaving. The tension in her posture says she's ready to strike at any moment. Kale doesn't flinch. He steps forward, gun unwavering. "Lower them," he repeats. One soldier starts to comply, but the other curses and opens fire. A bullet zips past Kale's shoulder. He fires back, hitting the shooter's rifle and knocking it aside. Chaos erupts. Sarika lunges, spear whirling, catching the soldier in the leg. He falls, howling. The other soldier tries to radio for backup, but Kale smashes the device with his boot. "Commander!" the soldier shouts, eyes wild. "This is treason!" Kale's jaw is set. "Maybe." The soldier tries to raise his rifle again, but Sarika disarms him with an elegant twist, sending the weapon clattering away. She could kill him easily. Instead, she pins him with the spear at his throat. Kale's chest heaves, adrenaline spiking. He sees the cruelty in the man's eyes, the possibility that they'll keep coming after them if left alive. But he also knows that killing them might spark an even larger pursuit. He steps up, pulling Sarika back. "We need the ship." She looks at him, then at the soldier. Slowly, she withdraws the spear. The soldier coughs, rolling away. Kale's stance is firm, weapon trained on them. "Leave," he orders. "Tell command you found me dead. The ship was destroyed. We never existed." The soldier's face contorts with fury and disbelief, but he sees the unwavering resolve in Kale's eyes. "Commander, you're making a mistake. They'll never stop hunting you." Kale nods once, voice cold. "Then we'll be ready." Without another word, the soldier helps his wounded comrade to his feet, and they limp off toward the tree line. Kale waits until they vanish into the foliage. Then he and Sarika exchange a look. Something final has been decided here, a line crossed. He's chosen her, over everything he once believed. They hurry to the landed craft, scanning it for booby traps or lockouts. Thankfully, the soldiers hadn't expected to find a living ally, so the systems remain accessible. Kale climbs into the cockpit, powering up the engines. The console beeps, lights flickering. Sarika slides into the co-pilot's seat, shoulders taut with tension. He checks the nav. Short range. We can't jump off-world. But we can find a path to a safer location, maybe a border station where no one will ask questions. She exhales, leaning back in the seat. So that's it, then. You're a traitor now, by your people's standards. He glances at her. You care? She tries to smile, though it's strained. I wasn't supposed to. I was supposed to break you. He nods, powering the thrusters. You did. The ship lifts off, leaving behind a swirl of dust. They bank toward the horizon, the jungle receding below. For once, they're not pinned down or on the run in the same desperate way. But the future is uncertain. He can feel it in the hammer of his heart. She watches him from the corner of her eye, her luminescent collar glowing softly. Then she reaches out, rests a hand on his. He doesn't pull away. They turn their attention to the flight controls, guiding the craft toward the one region rumored to be a neutral zone. Maybe they'll find asylum there, or at least a place to breathe. The silence between them is thick with everything they haven't said. Underscore 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 underscore. Weeks pass in a blur. They cross systems, skirting the edges of contested space, forging documents, hiding from patrols. A tenuous truce lies between them and the rest of the galaxy, but official channels label Kale a deserter, Sarika a fugitive spy. They rely on each other completely, trusting no one else. Each day is a test of loyalty and survival. They take odd jobs on remote outposts, always moving, always watching their backs. Their relationship shifts from uneasy alliance to something more. Late nights in cramped cabins or hidden bunkers foster closeness. They spar verbally, just as sharp as ever, but the undercurrent of desire has blossomed into a raging tide. They can't deny it anymore. Each heated argument ends with them panting inches apart, eyes locked, pulses wild. One evening, on a stormy planet far from prying eyes, the tension shatters. They've found a small shelter to ride out acid rains that pelt the landscape. The walls vibrate with the fury outside. Inside, they face each other, adrenaline coursing after a near-fatal trek through toxic sludge. She's battered but still luminous, eyes fierce. He's soaked, every muscle taut. Their breathing merges in the confined space, hearts pounding a rhythm neither can ignore. She pins his wrist against the wall. You think I can't see how you look at me? How you want this? He exhales, voice ragged. That obvious, huh? She snarls softly, leaning in. It's maddening. You're so stubborn. He flips their positions, pressing her against the wall instead. Look who's talking. Her body arches, a dangerous invitation. He hesitates, fists clenched, every cell in his body alight with primal hunger. They collide in a flurry of need, lips, hands, raw desperation. There's no softness, no gentle exploration. It's a battle, each trying to dominate. She bites his lower lip, he grips her waist hard enough to leave bruises. It's a fusion of anger and desire that leaves them both gasping. The storm intensifies outside, thunder shaking the small shelter. Inside, they unleash pent-up fury and longing until they collapse, breathing hard, skins slick with sweat. They lie there on the floor, hearts thudding in unison. She brushes a hand over his chest, and for once, there's no sarcasm in her eyes, no mocking. Just a quiet, vulnerable acceptance. Wasn't supposed to feel this, she murmurs. He brushes a thumb along her ridged scalp. Neither was I. She turns her face toward him, a flicker of softness there. Now what? He closes his eyes, the weight of his choices settling. We keep going. Together. They cling to each other through the night. No promises made, no illusions about the war raging outside. But they've surrendered to something undeniable. She rests her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat as the storm rages on. In that moment, they forget the cruelty of the galaxy and the lines that once made them enemies. Underscore 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 underscore. Weeks more pass. Word spreads that Kale Jareth and the alien Sarika have formed a rogue partnership, defying both armies. Bounties appear on their heads. They dodge raids, sabotage outposts, and slip through blockades. Each confrontation only deepens their bond. They fight side by side, bleeding for each other. Passion flares in stolen moments, savage and consuming. Yet beyond the physical, there's an unspoken sense that they share a deeper connection. They've both lost everything for this. Eventually, rumors lead them to an uncharted border zone, a refuge for exiles and mercenaries. They land on a barren planet riddled with volcanic activity. Smoke hangs in the air, and the ground trembles with seismic unrest. Here, they hear whispers of a final chance at escape, a hidden warp gate, presumably left behind by an ancient civilization. If it still functions, they could vanish to a region beyond the known galaxy, free from pursuit. They set out across the treacherous terrain, guided by half-baked coordinates. Sulfuric winds lash them, but they press on. They cling to each other when the ground shakes. Her luminescence flares in the gloom, a beacon for him to follow. He keeps a protective arm around her, feeling the heat that always simmers between them. At last, they crest a ridge and gaze down into a cavernous expanse. Lava streams illuminate the pit, revealing a massive, ring-like structure. A machine of unknown origin. It crackles with dormant energy. Kale's breath catches in his throat. They approach cautiously, hearts pounding. If this is real, if it's stable, they might have a future free from the war that created them. They descend into the cavern, picking their way across jagged rocks. The ring looms overhead, silent but imposing. Sarika kneels at a nearby console, brushing away centuries of ash and dust. She tries to power it, but nothing happens. A sense of dread tightens his chest. If this doesn't work, if it's just a myth, they have nowhere left to run. She fiddles with the controls, realigning crystals and ancient circuits. Sparks fizzle. The ring hums. Then a swirl of energy flickers across its surface, forming a shimmering gateway. She staggers back, eyes wide with awe. Kale approaches, transfixed. They can see faint stars through the portal, or maybe illusions of some cosmic beyond. Before they can step through, an echoing voice rings out. They whirl around to find a strike team from both sides, human soldiers and alien troopers, combined forces determined to end their defiance. Leading them are the same Special Ops officers Kale once served with, and an alien commander in gleaming armor. Guns and plasma rifles are aimed, boots crunching on the rock. Kale's chest knots. They're outnumbered. The warp gate hums behind them, tantalizing. He and Sarika exchange a single, fierce look. A silent vow passes between them. No surrender. Together. They dive into the fray, weaving between blasts of energy and bullets. She hurls herself at the alien troopers, using her spear and unnatural agility to strike them down. He lays down suppressive fire, picking off soldiers who try to flank her. When a grenade arcs through the air, he lunges, grabbing it mid-flight, and tosses it aside, where it detonates in a shower of molten rock. A bullet grazes his arm. He barely feels it. Adrenaline and love, yes, love, fuel every heartbeat. She roars, her collar blazing bright as she leaps onto the alien commander, grappling for control. He tries to tear her off, but Kale arrives, driving a blade into the commander's side. The alien collapses, and Sarika rolls free, panting. More reinforcements charge in, relentless. The ring behind them crackles, energy swirling faster. An alarm sounds from the console. Destabilization imminent. If they don't step through soon, the gate might collapse. Bullets ricochet off the ground at their feet. Plasma bolts scorch the air. They're pinned down, trapped between the gate and the oncoming soldiers. She glances at him, desperation shining in her eyes. "We have to go!" He nods, firing off a final barrage to buy time. Then he grabs her hand, and they sprint for the ring. Gunfire screams past, and an explosive blast rocks the cavern. Lava churns dangerously close. They leap, crossing the threshold just as the portal flares. The combined force of the energies sucks them in, a brilliant flash swallowing them whole. The strike team rushes forward, but the gate implodes, the ring shattering in a cascade of molten debris. The portal vanishes, leaving behind nothing but swirling ash and a tortured, empty cavern. No sign of Kale or Sarika remains. The soldiers stare in stunned disbelief, denied their prize. Underscore 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 underscore. Months later, in a dusty, half-lit corner of a nameless trading post on the edge of known space, she sits at a small table, swirling a glowing drink. Her scalp ridges are partially covered by a hood, but anyone who looks closely can see the faint luminescence along her collar. Her eyes are distant, as though she's scanning the room for a ghost. The warp gate dropped them in an unknown sector, far from the reach of either side's main forces. Life here is raw, lawless. They've made do, blending in where they can, building a quiet existence on the fringes. Yet she can't shake her old habits, always watching the door. A figure steps in, broad-shouldered, scars visible even under a worn jacket. Her heart stutters. He meets her gaze, a flicker of relief crossing his face. Wordlessly, he crosses the room, ignoring the stares of the patrons. He sits opposite her, exhaling slowly. She notices the tension in his shoulders, a lingering weariness that never truly fades. "You came," she murmurs. He shrugs, mouth tugging in that grim half-smile. "Didn't plan to. But here I am." They lapse into a charged silence. She can sense his hesitation, the swirl of conflicting emotions that define them both. He reaches across the table, and she sets her hand over his. The contact sends warmth spiraling up her arm, the old magnetism pulsing to life. No words are needed to convey what they've endured, what they've sacrificed. She bites her lip, luminescent collar glowing in a faint blush. "I never got to break you, you know." He chuckles softly. "You did. In a way." Her cheeks flush deeper. "So why am I the one blushing?" He lifts her hand, pressing it to his chest where his heartbeat resonates. "Because," he says, voice low, "we both know how this ended." She inhales shakily, a half-laugh escaping. They lean in, foreheads touching. No armies, no pursuit, just a moment of quiet completion. The swirling chaos of the galaxy fades away in that intimate space, replaced by the steady certainty that, for them, this is right. In defiance of everything that tried to tear them apart, they have chosen each other. She closes her eyes, a small smile curving her lips. "I glow," she whispers. "Only for you." He brushes a thumb along the luminous band at her collar, the final barrier between them crumbling into ash. In a universe bent on conquest and destruction, they have carved out a fragile sanctuary of two, bound by passion, violence, and a love that neither can deny. The story reaches its end in that moment, leaving no cliffhanger, no unresolved tension. Just the sharp reality of what they have become together, and the absolute certainty that it is enough. They share a look that says everything words cannot. And in that look, the war and the grudges and the fear all dissolve, replaced by something far more powerful, an alliance forged in blood and sealed with a primal, desperate devotion. They rise together, hand in hand, stepping from the table into whatever tomorrow might bring, unafraid.